Hello again. It took me a while to decide what I should do my next video on, but then I thought I should talk about books, because as you can see, books are a really big part of my life, and everyone needs a book video. Plus I find that a lot of the books that I tend to recommend to people when they ask for books on Wicca aren't the norm. I don't recommend Cunningham or Ravenwolf or Buckland or a lot of the books that most people recommend. Not because I necessarily think they're bad, but just because I think they're better books. So, with that in mind, my favorite book on Wicca ever written, ever, period, that I try to force upon everyone, if I can, is The Triumph of the Moon by Ronald Hutton. I proselytize for Ronald Hutton. I love this book. I've read it so many times, and every time I learn something new, my copy is all written up. There's sticky tabs and highlighting and underlining. I actually own 2 copies because I'm slowly destroying this one. Triumph of the Moon is printed on Oxford Press. It's an academic press. Consequently, this book is a little bit more expensive. It's about 20 bucks, but you can still find it at most big-name bookstores and really easily on Amazon. Hutton is not Wiccan. He's not even pagan. He's a British academic, and he's widely regarded as being an authority on paganism in Europe. Not just paganism as in neo-paganism and Wicca, but paganism in general. He's also got a book on Druidry, and when I say Druidry, I mean actual Druids, not modern interpretations of what Druids might have done. He's got some really wonderful books on the ritual year in Britain. He's just wonderful. Yeah. Anyway, this book is really wonderful because it's written from a secular perspective. Hutton just sort of lays it all out there. He starts with the time period in which Wicca evolved, in which it developed, and where it came from. He goes in depth into the origins of Wicca, its relationship with Freemasonry and ancient religions, and Crowley's influence, and the feminist influence, just everything. He talks about how it developed in Britain, how it spread to the United States, how it changed after it spread, brief biographies of key players in Wicca's history, speculating a little bit on where Wicca's heading. It's a really wonderful book. So, highly recommended. Please read it. It's wonderful. A lot of the history books that are coming out now are just abridged versions of this one. So, if you've got the 20 bucks and you're looking for a really wonderful, really educational read, this is your best bet. Okay. The next book I want to talk about is Witchcraft Today by Gerald Gardner. And I recommend this book. I wouldn't recommend this to someone who didn't know anything about Wicca, but I would recommend it early on, especially to someone who was interested in practicing Wicca, just because I think it's important to go back to the source. Gerald Gardner, the kind of things that he was writing about, the Wicca that he was writing about, I find bears little resemblance to what the Wicca that most people practice today. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily good or bad, but it's very different, and I think if you're calling yourself Wiccan today, it's important to be aware of Wicca's history. And Gerald Gardner was a really interesting guy. Parts of the book are really funny just because I don't follow his logic all the time, but it's easy to see why he was so well liked and why people were attracted to him and wanted to be a part of his movement. So, check that out. Llewellyn released a new edition of this book a few years ago. You can get it anywhere. I think it's 14 or 15 bucks. The next book I want to talk about is The Circle Within by Diane Sylvan. This book, I think, would appeal to anyone regardless of tradition or lack of tradition, especially to solitaries. The subtitle is Crafting a Wiccan Spiritual Tradition, and it's all about incorporating Wicca into your daily lives. It's really wonderful. It's not spells or rituals or anything like that. It's all about rethinking your place in the world and rethinking your relationship with deity. It's a really wonderful book. I find it very inspiring. I read it frequently. This copy is underlined too. And this one is also easy to come by. So pick this one up too. I think, I can't imagine it not appealing to anyone. But that's just me. The next book I want to talk about is The Heart of Wicca by Ellen Cannon Reed. This book, again, really wonderful. A very different perspective than most of what's available today. Ellen Cannon Reed is very much a traditionalist, and she writes about Wicca as an initiatory mystery religion. She writes extensively on the value of training and initiation, having a teacher. These things are all very important to her, and important to her Wicca. And I want to say that it's a fresh perspective, but really it's the first perspective. So if you're solitary, or even if you're not tradcraft, I think that this book can still offer an interesting perspective on something that you might not have been exposed to otherwise. In my experience, people either really love this book or they really hate it, but I love it, and I think it's an important read regardless of how you feel about it, just to be exposed to different ideas. The last book I want to talk about is Out of the Shadows, Myths and Truths of Modern Wicca by Lilith McClelland. I'm pretty sure this book is out of print, but it's probably still pretty easy to find on Amazon. This book is geared towards people who, they're not totally brand new to Wicca, but they're not necessarily long-time practitioners either. And she talks about kind of how Wicca has evolved and a lot of the pitfalls that beginners tend to fall into and how to avoid them. Wiccan stereotypes and how to combat those stereotypes. Finding a study group or a coven. My favorite chapter is the one about, I think it's called 3 Things You Can Do to Mark Yourself a Beginner. Things that make it obvious that you just got into Wicca. Things like claiming you were initiated by your grandmother, and, you know, maybe it's true, I don't know, but a lot of people have made that claim, including Alexander's. So, anyway, it's a really interesting book, and I learned a lot of new stuff. So, if you can find it, pick this one up. It's a great one. So, those are the books that I'm recommending. There are a lot. As you can see, I've read quite a few. And I think it's really important to read whatever you can get a hold of. Although there are some authors that I really disagree with and I really don't like, and I wouldn't recommend, authors who aren't very popular. But I think ultimately it's not up to someone else to tell you that book X is bad and you shouldn't read it. I think, you know, you're intelligent people and you can be discerning with what you read, so I think you should be encouraged to read whatever you can, and I certainly encourage you to do so. And I love hearing about other people's opinions on books, so if you've got favorites, or if you hate what I picked, let me know. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.